Welcome to the Longevity Optimization Podcast, where we discuss longevity, optimal health, nutrition, peak performance, cognitive excellence, and so much more. Dr. Burkart, it's such a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. Today we're going to be talking about an incredibly important and I think under-discussed topic, and that is toxins in our environment. You have a background in toxicology. Can you share a little bit like what inspired you to get into that industry and kind of maybe some of the most interesting or like red flags that you found while doing your work?
I actually found toxicology somewhat by accident, but I think I was led there. And based on my experiences throughout life with toxins, having dealt with them personally, I feel like I was meant to do this work. But I found toxicology as a college student, and I was looking for a summer job as a dishwasher in the lab. And the lab that I landed in was a toxicology lab, and it was run by a female professor, which is not as common, especially in toxicology. It's a very small field. But she was studying the effects of environmental chemicals on reproduction, fertility, and cancer in both males and females. And so I just became extremely fascinated with what she was doing and just stayed in the lab. Basically, I never left. I graduated college and stayed on as a graduate student, started with my master's, and then I switched over to the PhD track, and then I just stuck with it. So I was basically in her lab going on 8 years.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Like, what an important topic, though. I mean, so wait, how many years ago was this that she was studying that?
She was studying toxic chemicals and their impact on fertility for over 20 years.
Wow. And we'll just jump right in then. What were some of those conclusions? And then we'll get into like the nitty details.
So what we were looking at were chemicals that were found in automobile exhaust and cigarette smoke, and they're known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. They're basically the products of combustion of organic materials. So anything that contains like carbon and hydrogen is technically considered organic material, right? So we're looking at the effects of these chemicals and how do they impact the ovaries in terms of the oocyte or egg quality, ovulation, also reproductive capability, meaning if you can get pregnant, how many babies you can have, and whether or not it's impacting your risk of cancer. So ovarian cancer being one of the most deadly types of cancers, since it's often undiagnosed until it's pretty far advanced.
Yeah.
And so what we saw was when we exposed pregnant mothers to these, we're looking at animal studies, we exposed pregnant mice to some of these chemicals, and you can see these pathological disease changes happening on the cellular level that were basically due to the depletion of glutathione. So glutathione being the master detoxifier in the entire body. The highest levels are in the liver and kidney, which makes total sense because those are the detox organs of the body. But the next highest levels, really interestingly, are the ovaries and the testes. So it just goes to show how important, of course, our reproductive capabilities are. And so these chemicals are coming in, they're depleting glutathione, they're causing oxidative stress, and ultimately infertility and cancer.
Wow. I mean, I'm not shocked at all. I mean, we know that I think fertility rates are decreasing at about, 1% per year over the last 30 years. Is that correct?
It's something like that. It's at a rate that is not normal. It's not something that we should be seeing. And I think it has definitely a lot to do with the environmental chemicals that are just all around us.
Absolutely. Just for anyone who is kind of new to this topic, I suppose, even though probably they aren't, because I'm obsessed with this also, what are some of the stats? I don't know the exact numbers around how many like new toxic chemicals or chemicals have been introduced into our environment over the last 20 years or so.
Well, we can look at it in terms of the number of chemicals that are registered with the EPA, and that's over 80,000. And only 40,000, so half of those, about roughly, have ever been even, let me rewind. 40,000 of them have been released into commercial products. So 80,000 are registered, 40,000 are in products that we buy every single day, home building materials, food, clothes, textiles, all that kind of stuff. And of those, a very tiny percentage, less than 1%, have ever been tested for toxicity. And that should be extremely alarming because if you think about just the sheer number of chemicals that are out there that are man-made chemicals that are not tested for toxicity, but we're just constantly being exposed to them, that should raise alarm bells, because chemicals, in my opinion, as a toxicologist, should be treated as guilty before proven innocent.
Yes.
And that's backwards in our country.
Yes.
And that's the reason why we're seeing such high disease rates. I'm 100% convinced of that. Just knowing what I know about chemicals and their impact on our health, I just know for a fact that the number of chemicals we are being exposed to that have no toxicity data behind them are a massive concern. And we need to start addressing them as soon as possible if we want to overcome health issues, if we want to potentially reverse health issues. It's both of those are possible.
I mean, I absolutely agree with you. And I think it's wild. Do you have any history? Like, is it just completely financial incentives? Is that how that's happened? Or was there a time where they're like, you know what, we're going to allow things, but we're not going to test them? Do you have any history on any of that stuff?
Starting around the early 1900s with the Industrial Revolution, chemical manufacturing just started to take off. Mm-hmm. Petroleum derivatives, it was discovered that petroleum could be used to make a lot of these different chemicals that can be used to manufacture things, that can be used in fuel and so on. So many use cases. And I'm not saying that they weren't helpful or beneficial, because they absolutely helped propel technology and the lifestyles that we have today, but they're also at a detriment. Mm-hmm. And so there was a time when the FDA, it was just trying to keep up with what was going on. And so the regulations were never really set in place to require that these chemicals be tested before being put into our products.
It's like, what is the point of the FDA? Like, if they're not good, yes, I get it. It's a big workload, right? But I mean, that's literally one of, in my opinion, like it should be their top concern. Because if companies are putting out, let's just use glyphosate as an example, right? Like we know the very dark history, I would say, of Monsanto being then purchased by Bayer. But how can it like compute whatsoever that you're going to allow this chemical to be sprayed on a massive amount of crops that then people are ingesting, and there's no process around that?
I think it has to do a lot with just the fact that regulations are extremely slow to take place. So first it has to start with some sort of a bill, and then the bill needs to get passed, and then there can be a lot of back and forth bureaucracy. And I think that the resources and the way that our country was set up is just not set up with health in mind first.
Yeah.
Because the way that our country is set up, and there are so many amazing things about living in this country.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, chemical regulation is not one of them. And you'll see that nowadays, California is really leading the pack in terms of removing chemicals, banning certain ingredients, prohibiting certain substances from going into kids' foods, lunches, food packaging, and that's so important. But we have to understand that it takes years, even once a bill is passed, to be enforced.
Yeah.
So yes, they've made bills. Let's get rid of heavy metals. We can't get rid of them, but let's test for heavy metals. Let's mandate that. Yeah. But that doesn't go into effect until 2027. So what do we do in the meantime? And it's that, unfortunately, the burden is on the consumer to really vet the products and to, dodge all of these grenades and landmines. And unfortunately, that's just how it is. We're just waiting to see the next toxin that pops up.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about ranking. Okay, ranking most important ones to avoid to maybe like to the top 5. Like, what is your opinion? Is it PFAS? Is it BPA and microplastics? Like, how would you rank these things? And then let's talk about what are some products that they're in.
PFAS would be at the top of the list because they bioaccumulate. And the problem being that we're continuously exposed, and most people, pretty much at this point, everyone has PFAS in our bodies. And we can't necessarily, we don't know exactly how to remove them, but the key is to avoid them as much as you can. Avoid further exposure. Just because you have them in your body doesn't mean that you will be impacted by them. So PFAS can be found, of course, in consumer products, like cookware is a big source of PFAS.
Teflon, right?
Teflon, PTFE, as it's also known. It's also found in rain gear, clothing, anything that's wrinkle or stain guard. It makes life really easy, but it also makes life more challenging when you are impacted with your health, right? Because there is a link to several different types of cancers. So testicular kidney cancer in people, thyroid disorders, miscarriage, infertility. So many health issues are associated with PFAS chemicals. And we're only now uncovering it, even though they've been in use for decades upon decades. And once they get released into the environment, they don't break down. That's really the problem. Even though there is a lot of work going on with remediation and scientists are trying to figure out ways to destroy them, that's still going to take so much time to figure that out, and to actually implement that and to do environmental remediation is seemingly impossible at this point, but hopefully that changes.
Jeez. And what's like the purpose of a PFAS? Is it sheerly like non-sticks, like wrinkle? Is it like a silicone? Like how would you describe a PFAS, like the actual makeup?
So PFAS chemicals are made with a lot of fluorine atoms on it. And what that does is make them very stable and inert. It seems like they're inert, right? Mm-hmm. They're very stable, meaning that they can't break down easily. And it imparts a waterproof and nonstick, slippery surface to whatever product you apply it to. So nonstick cookware, everyone pretty much knows how that feels when you cook an egg. It just slides right off. That's exactly what the PFAS are doing. They're also found in cosmetics. So if you use any products that are waterproof or long-lasting, those are probably telltale signs of PFAS in the product.
Jeez. I'm actually about to do only a PFAS blood sample. And there's a product, I mean, I don't know what the efficacy of this will be, but it's supposed to be a probiotic that can target PFAS specifically. Mm-hmm. So I'll keep you up to date on that. It's not even on the market yet. But
yeah, that would be amazing.
I'm going to do the before test, do the product, and then the after test. I mean, that would be, I feel like a blockbuster product, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I actually saw some interesting studies where they were using some proteins in okra.
Nice.
And seeing if they could break down PFAS. And it looked like there was some promising evidence there. So, I mean, how scalable that is, how can you make such a large amount of protein? And I mean, how could you do this? I don't know how feasible that would be, but it seems like it would be interesting nonetheless. Yeah. But something else that I read that was interesting is that women seem to be able to excrete PFAS more than men in the menstrual cycle, in the menstrual blood. So that could be one route of detoxification for women who are still menstruating.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wanted to hear that. Okay, so we have PFAS, number one. What would be number two for you?
Microplastics.
Yeah.
Yeah, microplastics, they're everywhere. They also don't break down, but they break up into smaller and smaller bits. So you have one piece of microplastic that breaks up into nanoplastics, which can then cross membranes in the body and cross barriers. And that's why we're seeing it in almost every human tissue. It's only a matter of time before they're found in the next tissue, right? It's like brain, lung, gut, blood, placenta, even in infant meconium, which is the first bowel movement of a baby. So that means that babies are being exposed to microplastics in the womb, which is horrifying, to say the least. But at the same time, how do we actually mitigate those? It's really avoiding plastic as much as you can. Yeah. Plastic is really because that's where it comes from, right? Microplastics. Yeah. And the problem is that once they're in your body, we don't know exactly how to get them out either.
Yeah.
And clearly they're accumulating because they're in all these tissues.
Yeah, it seems like once they're lodged in the tissue, then that's a big problem. What do you think about and we'll talk about all the tools, but is sauna and sweating, is that an effective tool? Like if the microplastics haven't become lodged yet in the tissue, or is it?
There isn't direct evidence on this, so I can't say for sure, but sauna, sweating, movement, they all promote detoxification. So it's beneficial regardless.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've read or heard that I think about 5% of the brain is now plastic because of these microplastics.
Yeah, there's a large amount of accumulation in the brain because the brain is a very fatty tissue. So microplastics being hydrophobic or attracted to oil, they tend to accumulate there. And so another reason why we need to really protect our brains, because the brain is an organ that cannot really detoxify itself. Yeah. So once something gets in there, it's just vulnerable to damage.
Absolutely. I took, I think it's like one of the world's first microplastic tests about 6 months ago. And, I got my results back and my levels are on the really low end, but I still have them. And I do, everything from trying to wear natural fiber, organic clothing most of the time. I'm not perfect, but this rug that we're using is organic, low tox couches. I don't drink tap water. We'll talk about the shower water thing, but where are the biggest sources that people are, if you can't do everything, where would you start to avoid microplastics?
Bottled water.
Yeah.
Bottled water and paper to-go cups for hot drinks.
Yeah.
Food containers. It's really the ingestion of the microplastics through the food and beverages. So processed food, anything that's packaged, you're going to have some level of microplastics. The water bottles, plastic water bottles, if you've ever squeezed one, you know how soft they are. Every time you squeeze them, there's shearing of microplastics into your water. Not to mention over time, they just automatically just start leaching. If you leave your water bottle in the sun, that's going to degrade the plastic. It's going to release more microplastics. But the microplastic particle in and of itself is already problematic. But the fact that they also release plasticizer chemicals, which would be the third on our list of toxins that I'm concerned with, being phthalates and bisphenols.
Yeah.
Those plasticizer chemicals, they're estrogen mimickers, and they are released from microplastics. So you're really getting, I don't even know at this point, a triple, quadruple whammy when you're drinking bottled water because of the quality of water, so the contaminants in the water, the leaching of the microplastics, and then the leaching of the plasticizer chemicals.
And talk to us about, I'm not super familiar with plasticizers and the other one that you mentioned. What are they? What's the purpose?
So phthalates are plasticizer chemicals that help to make plastics more malleable and pliable. So it helps to make them soft so they can be manufactured into different shapes. The problem is that phthalates are in pretty much almost every type of plastic out there, including the food packaging. So we're being exposed that way. But they're also used in a huge number of other consumer goods like cosmetics, fragrances being one of them. And this often surprises people because fragrances, you think, why would there be a plasticizer chemical in here? Well, the phthalates are film formers. That's what they're also known as. So they help with hair gel, hairspray, that kind of filmy feeling, nail polish. Phthalates are the ones that are responsible for imparting that film-like consistency. And the same thing with fragrances. They form a film over the fragrance. So it helps keep the fragrance chemicals active and more potent. So fragrance manufacturers love them because you can really cut back on the amount of fragrance chemicals used in your product, which increases profitability. And then from a sensory perspective for the consumer, they're like, oh, this is great. I can smell like roses all day long. And I only need to apply one spray or a couple sprays in the morning. And that's great. That's actually the worst part about the fragrances in many cases are the phthalates.
Interesting. Let's stay on fragrances for a second because I got rid of all like my conventional, I had like Chanel and Tom Ford and whatever, these like nice quote unquote fragrances. I got rid of all of them like a decade ago. And from what I understand, it's more than just phthalates, right? It's a variety of different things, and they don't have to disclose it because it's like this proprietary blend or something. Is that this fragrance just scares me so much.
Yeah, I agree with you. And they actually enjoy proprietary protection under the FDA cosmetic regulations that it's considered trade secret. So they don't have to disclose it and they just have to call it fragrance or parfum. And within that seemingly, benign word, there can be hundreds, an untold number of chemicals in that. Not all of them are toxic, but of those chemicals, there are known human carcinogens in there. Why are we being exposed to this day in and day out? Why are these products being promoted to young girls and young people who have their entire lives ahead of them, and they're being exposed to these unnecessary chemicals just for a sensory experience? Because I think they're really tapping into one of our, basic senses, which is smell. And it affects our mood. It affects how we feel about ourselves. And so they've really, really tapped into something. And I'm disturbed seeing how many scented and fragrance products are marketed towards children.
Yeah. It feels like everything, is scented. Like when if I go over someone's home, for example, and, we don't have like a tight relationship and they just have like all their regular stuff out, everything is scented. Everything. The hand wash, the soap, the lotion, there's like those little plug-in thingies that are like horrible. And then candles with it. It's just the average home, I would say, has so many scented products. It's like almost unfathomable. So we have fragrance. Are there any fragrances that you do like?
I would, if I do, which I don't even do fragrances anymore. I used to be one that was extremely, extremely obsessed with perfumes. Just like what you said, all the designer high-end perfumes, you pay over $100 for a tiny bottle and you think that it's the best thing and that it actually comes from flowers. And sometimes sometimes it might, but maybe only a tiny fraction of that. Most of them are made in synthetic drums, like big factory on that scale. Yeah. And there was an interesting study that I saw. They tested 47 designer perfumes. Some of them were manufactured in Europe. All 47 of them, 100% had phthalates in them. Even the ones that were made in Europe that are not supposed to have phthalates. They're not allowed over there.
Wow.
So they're still sneaking in. So people are, there's some fragrance companies out there trying to make, quote unquote, clean fragrances. I'm not entirely convinced.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced. If I were to enjoy a fragrance or a scent, it would be essential oil based.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I usually opt for as well. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough out here. It's tough out here. But I also feel like, this is a side note, but I feel like if you, are living a healthier lifestyle too, it also might change your scent and getting rid of some of like the deodorants and stuff. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are your thoughts on deodorant in general and the chemicals that are being, real quick about the fragrance. Also, I think a huge problem is where you're spraying the fragrance, right? Like you're literally spraying this on your thyroid, like on your lymph nodes. Of course, this is going to lead to a disaster.
If you think about what's in a fragrance, it's usually alcohol based, right? And alcohol is a penetration enhancer. So that in and of itself is already an issue. And they're just continuously releasing these fragrance chemicals from the bottle, even if you're not actually spraying it on yourself. It's just a continuous release. That's just because these chemicals are volatile. And volatilization means that they become gaseous. They become gases. And so they're in the air. Even if you might not necessarily pick up on it, they're still being released. Because over time, when you are exposed to a lot of fragrances, your brain will switch off the sensitivity to the fragrances because it's a process known as habituation. It's like when you walk into a room and something smells bad. You don't smell that for the entire time you're in the room. After a while, you don't notice it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's because your brain has decided that's no longer an important signal to keep firing on. Because our sense of smell is a survival mechanism. We evolved knowing, okay, this smells bad. This must not be good for us. But when you have too many fragrances, it's literally like you're just in muddy waters. You can't see clearly. You can't think clearly. You can't breathe. Obviously, water not being the best analogy there. But what I'm saying is it's like a haze. You're in a haze all the time. Your senses are dulled. They're muted. So how strong is your survival mechanism then if you're just constantly being bombarded with these fragrance chemicals? And once people get rid of them, I've noticed myself personally, and I hear every single day, oh my God, now I can smell everybody's perfume. I can smell everyone's laundry detergent and it smells terrible. And I can't believe it. And it bothers them, but it's actually an advantage, an evolutionary advantage, in my opinion. Yeah. It's an adaptive advantage because now you can smell it and you can get away from it.
I know. Imagine I feel so bad for people that work in a Bath and Body Works store.
I've had people comment on my videos where they say they worked in a Bath and Body Works store and had migraines and all these period problems that resolved once they left that job.
I'm not surprised at all. I can barely walk through I can't walk by an Abercrombie or something. Not that I really go to the mall anymore, but those or Bath and Body Works, I immediately feel it's not great for my brain. I just want to get away from it as soon as possible.
They have these machines that are just misting that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's terrible for people who are constantly exposed. They need fresh air, really, truly. And it's unfortunate that a lot of these stores cater to young people who are in their puberty years. in their early years, early life, this is really setting you up for illness later on.
Yeah. I mean, even babies, I'm sure there's tons of like fragrance scented baby products. And
something disturbing that I saw in regards to the baby products is that marketing. The fragrance helps the, baby bond with the mother. Wait a second. I thought babies were supposed to bond through the scent of the mother.
Right.
Not through the scent of this shampoo.
That's crazy.
It's the leading baby shampoo out there.
Wow.
Yeah. I saw the marketing, somebody sent it to me at a conference, a pediatric conference, where they're actually promoting this to physicians, to pediatricians, to help them get these products to parents of newborns. It's terribly disturbing.
That is very disturbing. Okay, so that's that with fragrance. What about other, female beauty care products? Like I've really taken a lot of time. I go to the EWG. Do you like that as a resource?
Yeah, I think it's helpful if you're just starting out. It's definitely helpful to know which products have fewer toxins in them. But if you want to go even further, then you really have to understand the ingredients list, what you're buying, what this ingredient does versus what another ingredient does. And really it is a helpful starting point for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely helpful.
But I still feel like sometimes, a lot of these apps, I used to like this Think Dirty app. And then I heard it was like purchased by Johnson & Johnson. I mean, immediately I'm not going to use that app anymore because I don't know that it's going to be accurate anymore. But yeah, with the environmental working group, so I would kind of just like look at the current products that I have, and I've tried to switch to like all organic mostly. What are some of the things that are lurking in these like beauty products? Because I've read some stats that women leave the house with like 1 to 200, I think 150 or something chemicals, like known gain. How do you even classify this? Because every time I make a post about something like this, people are like, well, chemicals are in everything, and it's your food is made up of chemicals. So how do you articulate this? Like, is it a dangerous chemical, known toxic chemical, to delineate what we're talking about versus just everything has a chemical makeup?
Right. I totally understand the question. And it's a really important point to bring up because, again, not everything's toxic.
Yeah.
And I think the aim of that fact and figure from the EWG was to really draw the attention to how many chemicals we're applying to the skin, just in general, just not even if they're toxic or not. Just think about what you're putting on your skin. And then of those 168, how many are concerning? Well, we can't necessarily put an exact number on that because every product is different. But if it's got fragrances, that's a huge red flag. There are formaldehyde releasers, massive red flag. We don't need any of those.
Why? What's the point of a formaldehyde releaser?
It's a preservative.
Okay.
And so it undergoes a reaction on the skin. They're found in some shampoos and stuff. They're mostly being phased out, but I'll still see them. If I'm walking through a major store, I'll pick up bottles just to check and see what's going on. Because years ago, when I started this journey, over 10 years ago, no products in stores were anything that I would consider safe to use.
Yeah.
None. So everything had to be found online, and the quality of the products back then that were safer, more wholesome, more organic, they just didn't do that much for me. And so I kind of felt myself, in limbo for a while. I need something that works, but I don't want all of the toxins. But nowadays it's getting a lot better in stores. You can find health food stores. That's a great place to start if you're able to. If not, really just cutting back on the number of products can really help you with toxic load, with expenses. But I think I want to touch back on the deodorant because that is something that a lot of people are using. Most people use deodorant, right? But the real issue is the antiperspirant. The antiperspirants with fragrances. So antiperspirants contain aluminum salts, and those physically block sweat ducts. And sweat is a detox pathway. We don't want to block that. We need that. But what happens is the aluminum gets lodged in our sweat ducts, but it can also translocate into the circulation, into the lymph nodes, into the breast tissue, because we have a lot of lymph nodes in the underarm, and the fragrances that are also in these antiperspirants. So you're really getting a lot of toxic bang for your buck in conventional antiperspirants.
Jeez.
Especially let me just preface that again with the aerosols. Then that would be the absolute worst product that you can use. It's an aerosol fragranced antiperspirant.
Yeah.
That contains aluminum.
Horrible. Because then you're also breathing it in, right?
Right. You're breathing it in. It's going into one of the most sensitive areas on your body. And you can actually remove those from your routine and do a armpit detox with some clay, some apple cider vinegar that can help to pull out some of those salts that are lodged in there. People have shared about it online, and I think it is helpful just to make that transition if you want to get rid of those antiperspirants.
Yeah. Do you have is there like a protocol? Like, do you do it once a day, like for 5 days a week, or any ideas of what that would look like?
I think you would do it maybe like once a week for a couple weeks. Okay. I mean, as much as you can.
Yeah. I'm sure we can find something. Yeah. So that's really helpful. What are some of the top ingredients that you like in deodorants or that you think are acceptable? I know like baking soda is a pretty popular one. I tend to be pretty sensitive. So any product that's a deodorant with the first ingredient is baking soda, it doesn't really react super well for me.
Yeah, I think for some people the pH can be too high and it's irritating. Mm-hmm. But what I've seen is arrowroot starch. Okay, that's a food, right? Food ingredient. Coconut oil is really helpful. Mm-hmm. So I think my favorite deodorant is made out of those. Is coconut oil with arrowroot powder. I use one with or without baking soda. It doesn't really make a difference to me personally, but if you're sensitive, then you can try baking soda free. But those tend to perform pretty well for me.
I love that. I think it feels like people are becoming way more aware about deodorant, but I mean, still there's like 100 brands on the shelves that are horrible. So, and again, I'm just like, what is wrong with these companies? Like, is it, to deter for a second, I'm sure you've seen what's going on with all this Kellogg stuff, right? So a lot of my friends are super involved in this movement, like Dr. Casey Means and her brother Callie Means. And it's just weird because like you're putting substances that harm children into the food, and you won't even take a meeting with 1,000+ people that are all doctors that came to have a conversation with you. It's mostly doctors. I mean, it's so mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I think that companies, if they found a market and they've have a customer base. I think the problem is with a lot of these ingredients is, yes, there is mounting evidence and data. Well, first let's back up. The reason that they're in food is because they're cheap.
Yeah.
They're cheap and easy to produce, mass produce. And because they give this, again, they're triggering our senses. Okay, if we think about this, the fragrances, sense of smell, the bright colors, our eyesight, we're sensory beings. We're just basically being overloaded at this point with all of these products. But the reason that they're in foods is because they're cheap. They make bright colors. They stimulate children. They get kids excited to eat them. They think it's fun. I mean, I used to eat that when I was a kid too because I had no clue. But the issue really is that there is no testing up front required. So it's throw it in there and hope for the best. And so we're basically human subjects. We're in a human experiment, right?
But what's funny is why can they quote unquote test for things like slapping a heart healthy label on it, but they can't test for, the toxicity? It's like interesting, like, oh, you supposedly validated this through the thing that benefits you, this fake heart healthy thing, like heart healthy Cheerios or whatever, and heart healthy canola oil. It's like, it's just so crazy to me.
I mean, it's profit driven at the end of the day, right? It's a business. And so they've exploited the system. They found what works. They found what people are buying and just hoping that no one figures it out. And that's it's diabolical, really.
I know.
And it should be criminalized. But until we reach that point, then the only option we have as consumers is to stop buying them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just keep spreading the word. Keeps telling people, spreading the word, because obviously with their behavior, they don't care about what people are saying.
I know. They wouldn't even take a meeting. I was shocked. I was like, that was not good for your personal interest to not take a meeting when all these people showed up.
Yeah. I'd at least, let people know where you stand and if you're actually doing something about it. And I think the thing is that regulations are already set in place, at least in California, to remove some of these. And so the companies are probably already making moves to remove them anyway, because when a company is selling products in the US and there's almost no way to make a separate California version.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they'll just have to remove everything just to make it easy on themselves. I mean, I used to work with a lot of these food manufacturers, unfortunately, when I was in the flavor and fragrance industry. And so I could understand why it's challenging for them to remove things, even though there is mounting evidence and data. I'm not defending them whatsoever. I think it's disgusting. But I can just say that logistically, it takes a long time for these things to happen. So the best thing that we can do is just to stop buying them.
Yeah.
Boycott, stop buying them, tell all your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everyone that you know the problems with this. And it's not about fear mongering. It's just now we know this is just the unfortunate consequence of the system that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for saying that too. I've been, when I make posts sometimes, I mean, not most of the comments are overwhelmingly positive, right? But some people, like, they do feel like it might be a fear mongering thing, even though I have like really no incentive to talk about it other than like, I think it's important. But yeah, it's the reality of the situation. It's very unfortunate. And I feel like you have to be like a full-time researcher these days just to figure out like how to purchase items for your home. It's really sad.
Yeah, I think it is really sad. And I think that things are shifting and changing because there is so much more awareness now. Whereas when I first started on this path, I felt like I was completely isolated and alone and the only person that was even thinking about this kind of stuff, except for a small subset of people within the, functional medicine, integrative medicine community that I was in as a patient.
Yeah.
That was the only place I really felt understood. But now there's even sections in stores that are clean, right? Even though there's a lot of greenwashing, at least there's an attempt. There's an awareness and an attempt. And so I'm happy to see that. I'm really happy to see that.
Yeah, same.
And like you said, the apps and the websites, people trying to help, vet products and make it easier for people to get a hold of better stuff.
Absolutely. And also, I think, you mentioned the cost, and we know that things can be really expensive. I feel like a lot of like food products, like you said, could potentially, like apple cider vinegar or vinegars for cleaning. I have a ozone system for which, it's it's a couple $100 upfront cost, but it washes it for the clothes washing. So I'm not using detergent at all anymore. And over time, you're actually going to save money, versus buying all of these, toxic most of the time, cleaning detergents, stuff like Tide and Tide Pods and all that craziness. So I also got a microplastic filter for my dryer.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I think it's a great, of course it's not going to pull out everything, right? But it's like something.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, it's also not reasonable to expect that we are going to get rid of everything overnight. Yeah. Like, okay, I still have polyester clothes, but that's because I don't want to just dump them in a landfill and just pollute the environment. And plus, it's an upfront, like you said, it's an expense too, right? I already have it, so I'm going to do what I can to minimize my exposure to it with things like the filters that you put into your dryer, and you put them in a special bag that can filter out microplastics and things. And like you said, the upfront investment might seem more, but if you look at the cost over a lifetime, it's a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, you can use simple things in your pantry: vinegar, citrus peels, Castile soap. You can make a whole bunch of different products, baking soda. I've used a lot of those things in my own bathroom that work better than those chemical cleaners.
Yeah. Dang, chemical cleaners, that's a really good one. When it takes your breath away, when you open this, I remember when I was cleaning, like when I was still living at home, right? Like my job was like cleaning the bathroom or something, or even like doing the dishes. I remember I was using Dawn soap and I would get these rashes on my arms. And I was telling my mom, I'm like, look, I'm like allergic to the dishes. And she thought I was just, saying it to get out of it. I'm like, no, seriously. And, it's wild. What are some things, that we should be looking out? Should we just completely be ditching like conventional cleaning products and going for something more natural?
If you're able to. There are just, very simple things like Castile soap you can use all around your house. You can use it for your dishes. It just really depends on your quality of your water. If you've got hard water, that could be a problem, but it just takes a little bit of experimenting and figuring out what works for you. But household cleaning products are some of the most toxic chemicals we bring into our homes. If you ever looked at the back of it and there's a hazard statement or a warning label, put that back. Don't even use that. I mean, why are you bringing that in? It's because these companies have conditioned us to believe that we need harsh chemicals to clean. Yeah. And it's not true. There's actually studies showing that a 50-50 freshly prepared solution of vinegar and water can kill E. coli on some surfaces, right? And most people are concerned with E. coli, salmonella, and things like that. You can even use 70% alcohol, isopropanol, to clean your house, really. Truly.
What about like superheating, like a steamer or something?
Yeah, I think steaming can help too, because it's just water, right? You're just it's just water vapor. Yeah, that's definitely something that if you can get a hold of something like that, that would be great. But something simple, just like alcohol based, you can make your own solutions. There's a lot of recipes online. I mean, just to give you a frame of reference, when I was doing sterile cell cultures in the lab, we used to spray and wipe down all of our equipment with 70% alcohol. And we didn't get bacterial contamination. There was no problem.
Yeah, I mean, I own a medical clinic and we use alcohol.
There you go.
Before
anyone,
IP.
Yeah, anyone can get a hold of isopropanol or rubbing alcohol from the drugstore, from the dollar store even. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's just all it takes is knowing what actually works. But you don't need to use that stuff all the time anyway, because we're not trying to create a sterile environment in the home or disinfect everything. That's not necessary in your own home.
Yeah.
Right. I think more on, like you said, in the clinic.
Yeah.
In the industrial level, yes, then we want to do that. But at home, I don't do that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been using like really natural stuff for a long time. I don't get sick. I did find this like really great cleaning robot recently, just because I have a lot of people walking through because of the podcast. And it does a steam clean of the floors, which
wow.
Suso does it every night.
Oh, that's cool.
I feel so blessed by this thing. Yeah, it's great, but I love that. Okay, let's talk about more like female products. So this obviously huge controversy with tampons, right? And like these heavy metals. And I mean, gosh, you would think that if you were putting something into the vaginal canal, the vaginal microbiome, like you would have to think through that so deeply, which clearly these companies are not doing. What other chemicals are in? I don't even know what to use anymore, truly. Like I've heard the period underwear are horrible. I've heard the pads are horrible. I've heard the tampons are horrible. Like what do we even do here?
Well, I can tell you that in tampons in particular, there are a good amount of toxic chemicals in there. So like you said, the heavy metals, conventional cotton is sprayed with glyphosate. Then we have benzene, which is a human carcinogen. We don't want those volatiles.
What's that one for in there?
Nobody knows. It's just part of the manufacturing process. I don't know how it ends up in there. It's not clear. But we have phthalates, plasticizer chemicals. We have fragrances, lotions, perfumes, all these kind of unnecessary. Oh, and also, microplastics, right? You got plastics in there too. So just unfortunately, conventional tampons are some of the worst that you can use. But of course, if you have no other choice, you have no other option, then that's what you've got. But if you do have the ability to choose better, then look for organic cotton. I would go applicator free, just to get rid of that plastic component.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hi guys, I'm going to interrupt this episode for a brief announcement. As you may or may not know, I started a community for females by females, and it's a female longevity optimization community. This is a place that you can connect with like-minded women. We are all here to support each other, and there's a variety of different benefits to being a member. You get a monthly Ask Me Anything, so submit your questions and I'll answer them directly. We also have an entire library of courses on all of the important components of longevity, such as labs, nutrition, exercise, sleep optimization, longevity optimization protocols that I'm doing, along with real-time updates to my personal protocols. There are so many benefits of being a member of the community. We'll also be doing in-person live events here in California and virtual events for anyone that can't attend. But if you're interested in joining the community, I would absolutely love to see you there. And I will include a link in the show notes.
And there's, some brands out there that are doing testing now because of this study that came out looking at the heavy metals. Okay. And I think that the heavy metals have always been there because that's just, part of being a plant, right? Cotton is grown on a tree. there's just heavy metals in soils. And sometimes it comes from the atmosphere, sometimes it comes from the soil, from fracking, from so many different processes that happen outside. It can increase the amount of heavy metals in certain crops.
Yeah.
So I think that's just obviously a terrible situation, but I don't think we necessarily need to be so alarmed. Just be aware and try to look for the brands that have tested for them and look for organic cotton applicator free.
What do you know any of the brands off the top of your head that are testing for them?
NatraCare is one that I know of.
Okay. Ordering those right away.
Yeah. And there are also other reusable period products. I use period underwear, and they work great for me.
Are there issues with the period underwear though too? Or are there also chemicals in them, or you found a brand that's great?
Yeah, I found a few brands that were actually tested for PFAS. So PFAS was one of the main chemicals that were found in some of these mainstream period underwears like Thinx. There was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit settled because of high levels of PFAS in the crotch area, because it was used as a barrier to provide like a waterproof layer to the period underwear. And so then, of course, somebody found it and they're like, wait, what is that doing down there where PFAS chemicals are known to cause harm to the reproductive organs? This is horrible, and rightfully so. It's terrible. Should never have been in there. They try to say now that they removed them, but at this point, I wouldn't even trust a brand that even had them in there to begin with, because why?
Yeah.
You know, that's just suspicious and raises major concerns. But there are period underwear that don't have them. And so they'll use more sustainable fibers, organic materials. And so I have found some that do work well for me. So that's what I use personally.
Drop brand.
Yeah, the brand that I like personally, why am I just completely blanking?
We can always drop it in the show notes.
Yeah. Why am I blanking on it? It's my favorite brand. Oh, it's called Revol Cares. Revol Cares.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a Canadian brand, and they use bamboo
nice.
in the underwear. They're very comfortable. I tried out a couple different brands, and so I settled on that one. And another one is Lilova.
Okay.
Those are the two that I like the best.
What about these period cups that some people are using?
So period cups are made out of silicone, right? Which is considered, it's a synthetic material. It's considered silicone rubber. And over time, the silicone does break down. It does degrade. So are they releasing particles is the question. When they're new, maybe not. But over time, they can lose integrity. So it's something that, even though it's considered reusable, I don't know how sustainable it is in the long run if it's eventually going to fall apart.
Yeah.
But,
a good point.
you know, it's not necessarily a horrible choice. I use period cups from time to time if I'm traveling and I'm not able to, you know, easily change out my period underwear, then period cups come in handy for that.
And what about like pads? Or do those also have like a ton of PFAS, just general pads?
I wouldn't say PFAS, but some of the other chemicals that we've mentioned, like that dioxins, glyphosate, plasticizers, perfumes, things like that, can be found in pads as well. So organic would be best.
Yeah.
Especially on the part that is in direct contact with your organs down there, your reproductive organs.
Yeah. Such a shame. Like people putting in these tampons, including myself when I was growing up and not knowing and it not being organic. And that's just horrible.
Especially like young girls.
Yeah.
You're in, you know, your body is rapidly changing. And so these little chemical insults, you don't know what they're doing to you in the long term, right? And the long-term health consequences that they could be having.
Yeah, I totally agree. I kind of want to do something a little bit different real fast. And I want to bring up one of my lab tests and ask you a few questions if you don't mind. So I was talking about this total toxic burden. And because there's so many toxins that are measured. So this is that test that I was referencing to you. So this is called the Total Toxic Burden by Vibrant Wellness. It's going to list things that are in the bad range basically first up here. So see how this is the moderate percentile, and I'll put a photo of this in the show notes. But so there's a high percentile, so when I look at these tests through the majority of people that, you know, I see resulting, they have like 20 toxins in the high range. So I have no toxins in the high range, and I only have these toxins in the moderate range, right? things like mercury, that's a heavy metal. We don't really have to go into that, but this is crazy to me. So I have not had a piece of inorganic food in over a decade. You've seen these I have 5 Jasper air purifiers in my home. It's enough to cover 3 of these homes or more, maybe 3 to 5. Filtered shower water, all the waters, and I still have this level of glyphosate in my blood. So it's really just unavoidable. Yeah. I mean, what else can we do?
I mean, I think like you said, you've covered the main areas in your life. And so at some point, there's just going to be a baseline background level. And so and I'm sure you're already doing a lot of the detox protocols and a lot of these things.
It's on the 5 times.
So yeah, it unfortunately seems like is it coming from your outdoor environment? Because that's also another source of glyphosate. Because definitely in my area and around the schools, we get notices that they're spraying. And we know and they notify us of what they're spraying. And glyphosate is often on the list.
And what do you guys do then about it?
We'll talk to the school, try to talk to the school board, try to get it phased out. And so far, not much of a response, unfortunately.
That's not surprising.
So, yeah, I mean, if your neighbors are using it, people use it at home. So you can buy Roundup at the hardware store.
Yeah.
And people use it at home. So it could be coming from your neighbors. It could be if you have gardeners that are coming, you could check on that too. But I think if you just live in the city or even in an agricultural area, because it just gets carried through the wind.
I know. It's insane to me. It's so pervasive. Are you familiar with some of these other ones? So what is this one? So environmental polyphenols. Have you seen this one?
Yeah, triclosan. Oh, good. You're in the green. Yeah, triclosan is an endocrine disruptor.
And where's that coming from?
So it used to be found in products like toothpaste and things like that, but they've for the most part, phased it out, but it can still be in the environment. So it's triclosan, bisphenol, that's a plasticizer. Nonylphenols could be in a lot of different cleaning products, industrial products. You'll see that.
Okay. I use all clean, The scary thing is if these results after everything I'm doing, it's just it's going to be so much higher in so many other people. And a lot of people don't have access to this test. Yeah. That's why I try to share this test and my results. And then if I do find anything, what I'm doing, obviously these are some herbicides, these are all low, which is good. But then we have glyphosate, which is, in the yellow zone, which is not good. Here's a few other ones. I don't know if you're familiar with any of these ones.
Perchlorate, that's a dry cleaning one.
Only dry cleaning?
Generally speaking, yeah.
Okay. So
that might also be found in jet fuel, but I know for a fact that's in dry cleaning. The other one I'm not familiar with, the N-acetyl carboxyl ethyl cysteine. I don't know that one off the top of my head. But diphenyl phosphate, that one might be a flame retardant.
Interesting. And they used to put this on a lot of couches and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. And that might be a flame retardant if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me on that.
Interesting. Then we get into these parabens, right? So I'm obviously very low in these, but these would mostly be found in a lot of the beauty care products.
Right. There's mainstream products out there for example, body lotion. I made a video about this and people are freaking out. Parabens in this body lotion, right? And so the problem is that you're putting this body lotion that's a leave-on product. You don't rinse it off. It's sitting on your skin and some people cover their entire body with it.
Yeah.
So you're basically just applying estrogenic compounds to your skin that are just sitting there.
It's horrible. So I do this test once a quarter. And so I can see any variations. For example, I moved, from one place to another and I didn't have a whole home water system filtration. I don't have it yet in this house. I do have shower water filters though, pretty big ones. I know the tiny ones do nothing, but I have pretty big ones. And so it's amazing because I see a direct correlation. A lot of people, I think, would say I'm crazy for thinking that you need to have shower filtration too. But I see a direct correlation in the increase in my most recent one of these and the, on the EWG, what's in the water supply. This is definitely a direct correlation. There's no doubt about it. So we have to be so careful.
Well, it's not crazy, actually. If you think about it, you're showering. If you have warm water at all, then you're inhaling some of these chemicals through the vapor and the steam. And then also because of the moisture in your skin. When you wet the skin, it becomes more receptive to certain chemicals.
Yeah.
So if you're just covering your entire body, that's a huge surface area that's being exposed to these chemicals. So it's not surprising at all. And I agree with you. Shower filtration is needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for a child.
Yeah, I know. Bath time and stuff, using tap water. It's like we just, it's not talked about enough, I feel like. We probably feel like it is because it's like kind of like close to our worlds. But I think there's so many people out there that just have no clue. I was going to tell a funny story about the parabens. So I do these tests on my husband too. And I, buy him these like I just use raw organic shea butter as a moisturizer. Like that's it. My husband doesn't love the smell, but it's okay. So I bought him these things, tried to send them with him to the gym. And I do a brief tox burn. I thought he was using them the whole time. And I see the parabens like shot up. And this was just from like a few months of using a quote unquote good brand at a really known gym around. And I immediately could tell him, like, you weren't using the products that I sent you with, did you? And he's like,
Exposed.
I know. He's like, well, it was just a quick lotion after my shower, like not a big deal. I'm like, but look, it is a big deal. So and again, not trying to like fearmonger, but we're literally going through lab results that you can, this test, if you got it, you could see all of the levels and then you can think through, I'm like, how do you get these things? Because some of them are like harder to kind of see. There's phthalates too. So like my phthalates are pretty low.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, and then we get to these VOCs. What exactly, can you describe a VOC to us? The volatile organic
volatile organic compounds, so there are certain chemicals that they can become volatilized. So they're just basically released into the air until you breathe them.
And they're often found in...
so things that are off-gassing, right? When people say off-gas, they're referring to volatile organic compounds.
And I know like mattresses have a lot of those in there, right?
Yeah, whenever you smell something that smells like chemically, like a chemical smell, those are VOCs.
Yeah.
Those are solvents, those are VOCs. So some of the worst ones... so HEMA, that's an important one. So a lot of these are just coming off of like consumer products, manufactured goods.
Couches. We were talking about saunas, the fact that some sauna companies out there, specifically the red light ones, are using these wood glues and then they're off-gassing into the actual sauna. It's like a complete disaster. So
you're basically like in a hot box then, right? Unfortunately. Because you're thinking that you're detoxing, but you could actually be doing the opposite.
I know. And getting blasted with EMF. So that's why we got to figure out a way and get you a sauna from Heavenly Heat. But this test is so fun, right?
It's really interesting to see this. But at the same time, it also, it's eye-opening, right? Because you're like, oh, there's things in here that I thought I had tackled. But the glyphosate one is not surprising because I've seen this from a lot of people too who have gotten a glyphosate test done and they're like, I eat only organic and I don't do this and I don't do that. But, it could be coming just from so many other places.
Yeah.
Just the environment, the air, it gets carried through the air. So people who live near agricultural fields have high levels of glyphosate, even though they didn't actually touch the glyphosate. It's just, coming in.
I know.
So, if you're in an urban area, you almost can't avoid it. If someone else, down the street is spraying, who knows how. I don't know the exact distance that it travels, but I know it travels.
Yeah. I feel like it's just generally in the air also.
Yeah. It's just crazy. It's the world's most heavily sprayed chemical. Like it's just used at such high levels around the world.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. They measure PFAS through like urine creatinine, which is interesting, but I'm going to do a blood test that's actually going to do a better job of measuring PFAS.
Okay.
So, this obviously looks like it's in the good range, so it's not too much of a concern, but yeah, this is, actually here's a breakdown of all the actual PFAS. So I'm doing pretty good on that, Jerry.
Well,
yeah.
I don't see any yellows, definitely no reds.
I know, but it's so hard work. But I'm proud of myself, though. Anyway, if anyone's interested, like if you need an eye opener, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, okay, that all sounds scary, but I think it's not a big deal for me, find a provider to call you in a Vibrant Wellness Total Tox Burden, and it will change your mind on that because, like I said, I can see it even with my husband. If I were to go use a traditional fragrance and a lotion for 3 months and I did another one of these tests, these levels would go like too red. I can assure you that.
I would probably say hypothesize even less than 3 months.
Yeah, totally could be less. But when I do my frequency of testing, when I did my next test, those levels would be, through the roof. So honestly, I feel like just trying to choose products that it's like everything in life, right? We've gotten so disconnected from how we're supposed to live. And, I actually have a friend named Darren Olin. He wrote this book called Fatal Conveniences. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
So, and it's like, I love that term because like everything is so quote unquote easy now, but it's easy for the moment. And then it's really hard down the road because we are obsessed with using these packaged processed goods, not using like simple things like organic shea butter or like organic, cocoa butter is great like for skin. And it's like one ingredient. So that's the way I think about it, at least.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that school of thought too. I like to think of it as skinimalism, just like using the minimal amount of ingredients and the minimal amount of products to achieve what your goal is. Just cut it back as much as you can. It's just not worth it in the end, especially knowing what we know now about all the mainstream products that are out there and even some of the, supposedly clean ones.
Yeah.
The price has nothing to do with it. It's shocking because you can pay $100 for an eye cream that's just entirely synthetic and full of cheap chemicals. But because they slapped a designer label on it, you're willing to pay over $100 for an eye cream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with the price tag. And you can get some really, like you said, just get some shea butter, get some cocoa butter, get some olive oil, get some beeswax. You can make your own stuff. In 5 minutes, you can make something. It's so easy. You can make your own lip balm. You can use the shea butter on your lips. You can use like all of these things. It's just so much easier when you scale back.
I know. Yeah, it's like I love that. What did you say? Skinimalism. I love that. Love that.
I didn't coin that phrase or that term. I saw it somewhere online and I thought, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I love that.
Yeah,
I'm going
me
to start
too.
sharing that.
Do you have? I think that I heard you have like some resources and products that you vetted on your website.
Yeah, I have a section on my website where I listed all the products that I love to use. And I only share products that I love because there's so many products out there. And yes, they might seem clean, but do they actually work?
Yeah.
And are they worth it? So I only put on there the products that I swear by. So water filters, mattresses, cosmetics, beauty, personal care products, baby. I have a baby section because it's so hard as a new parent. If you just found out you're pregnant, you're freaking out already. Just like, hey, I'm pregnant. What do I do now? I want to give that resource to parents just to help them out because I know what it was like when I was in that boat and I didn't have that. And I wish that I did.
I know. I totally agree. Well, I love that. I feel the same. I do. I have some products that because it takes so much time, so many resources. Like we're probably both in, I'll be honest, people sometimes send me stuff. So it's great that I get to try it that way. But I only ever talk about something if it works and if I've checked the ingredients. So I feel like that's where you're at too.
Yeah, that's really important because who do you trust anymore, right? It's like you don't want to outsource your health, but at the same time, you don't necessarily have all the time in the world to learn about every single chemical under the sun.
It takes so long.
Right. So
to find the product, it takes like something will be like do you know how long it took me to find a stainless steel salad spinner?
Really?
Like 3 weeks. Like
really?
I would, that when you're like, okay, I'm getting a salad spinner today, but then all of them were plastic. And then it took me like 3 weeks of, randomly going back to it to finally find one. And I just feel like these products.
That's surprising. It's so unfortunate.
It's so unfortunate. Like it's so hard. And it still has on the top, it still has plastic. It doesn't have plastic on the inside. So, I'm okay with it, but it's just wild how like we need a really incredible resource just for all the things.
Yeah. Hopefully my website helps with that, just at least whittles down some of the choices and the options that are out there because it can be a nightmare to try and research all of these things. And plus companies can market however they want. It's hard to understand what's legit, right? What's legitimately a better product versus another. And is it just the marketing? I really look at data and numbers. So I look at test reports. Show me the test reports. Yeah. If you have tested your water filter, show me that it works, not only when it's new, but when it's old.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, or like your air purifier, show me that it's actually removing stuff that you say it does. Show me the data. And that's how I look at things.
What about cooking pans and stuff? I kind of went on like a ceramic kick and then now I'm not so sure.
Are you using ceramic coated?
I don't want to drop the brand. It's a pretty well-known one.
You don't have to. I mean, is it ceramic coated?
I am not. It's a really popular one. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Yes or no?
It's a no.
That's what I thought.
And the reason being that, again, it has to be proven innocent. Mm-hmm. Always look at it as guilty before being proven innocent. Show me the data, show me the numbers, show me the evidence that even if it's scratched, show me what's actually leaching from them. So like some of these brands will send test reports like, oh, we're PFAS free, PTFE free. Great. But what else is coming off of there?
Yeah.
I don't know enough to make a truly educated and informed decision, because the last time I did that, I ended up, with one of these nonstick silicone coated or ceramic coated nonstick pans. They're still nonstick. Yeah. There's got to be something going on there. And based on the research and based on what I could find, they're silicone based, but we don't know the full technology because it's patented. And so it's protected. It's, again, trade secret. Nobody's telling you what's coming off of these ceramic coated pieces. So
what are you using? I know I also use cast iron and stainless steel, but like what are your favorites? What are you using in your kitchen?
So my favorite is pure ceramic cookware. It's just solid, whole ceramic. There's no coatings, nothing on it. And I like the fact that it's been tested for lead and cadmium leaching. It's even been tested, so that's the finished glazed cookware, but also the unglazed substrate underneath has also been tested and doesn't leach cadmium or lead. So that gives me assurance that even if it's scratched, I'm not getting exposed to these heavy metals.
That's important. What's the brand? Can you tell us?
Yeah, it's called Extrema.
Okay, good. I'm so excited because they are right here on my list, already talking to them, and just going to swap out everything. But that's the thing is like this greenwashing nonsense. It's like, everything is marketed as so healthy, and then they're like, it's so healthy, and then you have to take all this time to like dig into their data and figure out like, oh, it's okay, but it's really not. It's still not good.
Right. And I think it's really just being skeptical. Not in a negative way, but let me pause and just be a little bit more cautious. Let me ask more questions.
Yeah.
And the more open to questions a company is, the more transparent they are, that lends more credibility and more trust. In addition to obviously the numbers. So you've got to show me the numbers and you have to be able to answer my questions.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing either of those, I'm not buying from you.
Yeah. I love that approach. Last topic is toilet paper. We've been hearing about this a lot. I buy, of course, organic, bamboo. I mean, really, I try to, I was doing all the tushy, right? That was what I was doing. Like the bidet. Yeah. The toilets that we have upstairs now they're built into the wall. So you can't use a bidet. I'm trying to figure it out, but what options, like what's wrong with toilet paper, conventional toilet paper, and then what options do people have?
So one of the biggest things that's wrong with conventional toilet paper is that they're bleached. So that gives rise to the bright white color, but then it also creates dioxins. That's one issue. The other issue is the contamination with chemicals. So BPA is a plasticizer chemical. It's estrogenic. It's an endocrine disruptor. And it's coating on thermal receipt paper. And people have been throwing those receipts into the recycle bin. And then that ends up into the paper supply, especially with anything recycled. So unfortunately, even though you think you're doing a great thing by buying recycled toilet paper, that's actually the worst option because of that BPA from those receipts that were thrown into the recycle bin. So I urge everyone, don't take receipts. Try to get them digital. And if you do get a receipt, put it in the regular trash. Don't put it in the recycle bin.
Yeah. People don't have to use that thermal paper. Like at my clinic, we actually don't do receipts. We do email receipts because people are like, oh, where's your receipt? I'm like, I'm saving your health. We're not giving a receipt. We'll email it. But you can also buy like regular paper for those machines, as crazy as it is. But people, the thermal paper has like how much more it's BPA is the main concern, right?
It's BPA coated. That's what makes that thermal capability for you to be able to see like the print on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember back not that long ago, I think, they still had the real printer.
Yeah.
Like, was it like inkjet or something? They used to have those kind of receipts.
It's just all the things.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to think about, but at the same time, if you just take a step back and just do the simple, basic things first, I don't think it needs to be stressful at all. I think it can be pretty simple and straightforward. And there's just a few non-negotiables.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And also I would encourage people, like, I didn't just overnight change everything about like my home, right?
100%.
It was a slow build. It was like first cleaning products, beauty products, fragrance, like, just plan it out, and you don't have to throw everything away. Just like start upgrading it as you run out.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I mean, it might seem easy to people if they look at someone like you or I, and we've been at this for a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. So like one change, 1 foot in front of the other, 1% better every day.
Yeah.
And
you'll get there.
Yeah, it's a marathon.
Totally.
Not a sprint.
Yeah. I mean, this has been over a decade for me of learning and figuring it out. Yeah, exactly. So, well, this has been such a pleasure to have you on today.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and views expressed on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Kayla Barnes, does not accept responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of the information contained herein. Opinions of their guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.